Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we are jumping straight into something pretty unprecedented, actually. The single largest lawsuit ever filed by a major artist against their own record label, Universal Music Group.
We're talking Drake v. UMG, of course.
Absolutely. Our sources today, they're based on a really comprehensive legal analysis of this whole complex case. And they show us exactly what happens when, a high-stakes rap feud leaves the mic booth and lands smack bang in federal court.
Yeah.
And it potentially threatens, well, the integrity of the entire streaming ecosystem. It's kind of a shocking look behind the curtain.
It really is. You see the celebrity power, the corporate strategy.
Right. So our mission for you today is really to get past those headlines. We want to pull out the key insights here.
Yeah, we need to understand the specifics of, the alleged streaming manipulation. That's huge. And how defamation law interacts, or maybe doesn't interact, with hip-hop culture.
That clash is fascinating.
And fundamentally what this whole saga tells us about the power dynamics, between a superstar like Drake and the corporate machine, UMG, especially when billion-dollar contracts are involved.
Okay, before we dive deep, let's set the stage a bit. Context is key here.
Definitely. So this massive legal battle, it didn't come out of nowhere. It was the direct result of that really intense public feud between Drake and Kendrick Lamar that really blew up in spring 2024.
Right. Everyone remembers that.
And let's just get the outcome out there right away. Federal Judge Jeanette Vargas, she dismissed the case completely. October 2025. Drake got zero damages.
Okay, so let's unpack that, because the central tension here is it's wild. How did a rap battle, which, UMG itself argued Drake provoked and willingly participated in,
Right.
how did that escalate into a potentially billion-dollar lawsuit against the very company supposed to be backing him?
It's a great question, and it really starts with the timeline, doesn't it?
Yeah, walk us through that.
So Kendrick Lamar drops Not Like Us in May 2024, vicious track.
Very direct.
And it went beyond just artistic rivalry. It had some really serious allegations in there against Drake, things that sounded like criminal conduct.
Okay.
So fast forward to November 2024. Drake isn't firing back with another track. Instead, he's filing these initial pre-action legal petitions in a New York court. And the core allegation: active, coordinated streaming manipulation by UMG itself.
Wow. So not just standing by, but actively manipulating things. And these weren't vague claims, were they?
No, not at all. Drake's legal filing was incredibly specific, really detailed. It laid out 4 distinct ways UMG was allegedly, sabotaging him while boosting Kendrick's track.
4 specific ways. Okay, what were they?
Well, the first 2 were about sort of stream numbers and old school promotion tactics. First, Drake claimed UMG conspired to use bots.
Bots, like fake listeners.
Exactly. To artificially inflate the streaming numbers for Not Like Us on places like Spotify. Basically, digital ballot stuffing.
Okay, that's allegation 1.
Second allegation: classic payola. Paying radio promoters, maybe key playlist curators too, to pump up airplay for the diss track way beyond what its organic demand would justify.
So hitting him on the streaming side with bots and on the radio side with payola. Kind of a two-pronged attack.
That's the picture painted, yeah. Attacking from both digital and traditional angles, making the diss track seem like this massive organic hit when allegedly it wasn't entirely.
But you said there were 4 allegations. The next 2 sound like they get even more modern.
Oh, definitely. This is where it gets really tech-focused. The third was platform manipulation.
Platform manipulation, what does that mean?
Drake specifically alleged that UMG actually paid Apple.
Paid Apple?
Yeah, paid Apple to have Siri actively misdirect users. So if someone asked Siri to play Drake's music, they'd get sent to Kendrick Lamar's song instead.
Wait, seriously? You ask for Drake and get Kendrick?
That was the allegation. Think about the scale of that. It's not just fudging stream counts. It's like weaponizing the search function itself against your own artist.
Wow. I mean, just imagine asking Siri for, I don't know, Hotline Bling, and instead you get blasted with Not Like Us. That is, yeah. Next level sabotage is right.
It's a pretty shocking claim. And the final point, the fourth allegation, was a bit more subtle, maybe, but still powerful.
Okay.
It was about copyright. Drake alleged UMG removed copyright restrictions on platforms like YouTube and Twitch.
Why would they do that? Usually they're super strict about copyright.
Exactly, but by removing the restrictions just for Not Like Us, it allowed anyone, content creators, fans, whoever, to republish and reuse the track much more broadly without getting flagged or taken down.
Ah, so it helps the track go viral much faster, spreads it everywhere.
Precisely. It bypasses the normal digital rights management that UMG typically enforces, like religiously.
Yeah.
Makes the song exponentially more visible, way faster.
Okay, so that list of what allegedly happened is pretty damning. Bots, payola, Siri manipulation, copyright loosening. But the why? That's the billion-dollar question, isn't it? Why would a huge label risk damaging one of its biggest stars, one of its main moneymakers?
And that right there is the absolute core of the lawsuit. This is what potentially shifts it from just a music feud fallout into, well, a calculated corporate strategy. Drake's lawsuit laid it out clearly. UMG's actions, they alleged, were financially motivated, specifically by his upcoming massive contract renegotiation that was set for 2025.
Ah, the contract year, okay.
Yeah. The sources we looked at suggest the argument was this. The label wanted to actively damage Drake's public reputation, maybe make his streaming numbers look less reliable or powerful.
To weaken his negotiating position.
Exactly. If they could reduce his perceived cultural power, his stream authenticity, maybe they could argue for, less favorable terms for him in that new deal. Favorable for them, obviously. Potentially saving UMG hundreds of millions over the life of that next contract.
But wait a second. I mean, Drake is a cash cow for UMG, right? Intentionally damaging his reputation, even temporarily, just to save some points on a contract. Doesn't seem incredibly risky, almost like corporate self-harm in the short term?
Well, Drake's team presented it as a calculated risk, driven by, corporate greed, essentially. And it throws this massive spotlight on a huge inherent conflict of interest.
Which is?
UMG represents both artists, Drake and Kendrick Lamar. Now, okay, they're on different imprints within the Universal umbrella, but still.
Still under the same corporate roof.
Right. So how can a label ethically manage that? How do you allocate resources, promotional support, when two of your biggest stars are publicly at war? The lawsuit basically argues UMG didn't handle it ethically. They chose a side based on calculated financial advantage over fairness.
And when we talk about financial advantage or the damages Drake was seeking,
Yeah.
the numbers are just staggering.
Absolutely mind-boggling. Now, the specific amount, it was technically undisclosed in the public court filings. That's a pretty common legal tactic, sometimes called anchoring.
Right.
But industry sources, people close to the situation, confirmed Drake was looking for damages north of $1 billion.
North of $1 billion. How does a legal team even begin to justify that kind of number?
Well, you have to understand the sheer scale of Drake Inc., basically. He's not just a recording artist. He's an entire economy.
Yeah.
Even with all this controversy happening, his reported annual income for 2024 was around $60 million.
$60 million a year.
And his net worth. Estimates put it somewhere between, say, $250 million and $400 million. So the financial base is already enormous.
Okay, so the potential losses could be huge, too.
Exactly. And his claim broke down into several big categories of damages. One really crucial point here. Drake owns the copyrights to his own music catalog.
Which is rare, right?
Yeah.
Especially for someone who came up through the major label system.
Extremely unusual and critically important here. It means any devaluation of his music, any lost streaming revenue from these alleged tactics, it hits his personal bottom line directly. It's not just reducing the label's shared profit from his work.
Gotcha. So if UMG did tank his streams or reputation, they weren't just potentially hurting their own future earnings from him, they were directly attacking his personal assets, his catalog's value.
Precisely. That's a huge part of the compensatory damages claim. Then you add in things like lost endorsement deals, damage to his brand partnerships, other commercial opportunities.
Right, the ripple effects.
Yeah, and crucially, the impact on his future earnings. The lawsuit suggested, pretty plausibly actually, that the reputational damage from all this could cut his income by maybe 10 to 20% over the next 5 years.
10 to 20% of $60 million a year. That adds up fast.
You're looking at $30 to $60 million just in lost future income, based on that projection alone.
Okay, so you've got catalog devaluation, lost deals, lost future earnings. But that still doesn't quite get us to $1 billion, does it? There must be a multiplier.
Correct. That's the final piece. Punitive damages.
Explain those.
So in cases where you allege really malicious behavior, like intentional sabotage motivated by greed.
Which was Drake's core claim.
Right. Lawyers seek punitive damages not just to compensate the victim, but to punish the defendant, UMG, in this case, and importantly, to deter them and others from doing similar things in the future.
And those can be big.
Oh, yeah. Punitive damages often multiply the actual compensatory damages by 2-3 times. Sometimes even more, depending on the jurisdiction and the severity of the conduct alleged.
Okay, now I see it. You take the hit to the catalog value, the lost endorsements, the $30–60 million in future earnings, add all that up, and then potentially multiply it by 3 or more.
And suddenly, that billion-dollar figure, while maybe aspirational, starts to look at least hypothetically achievable on paper from a legal strategy perspective.
And here's where it really connects back to you, the listener. Think about this. If a global superstar, someone earning $60 million a year, still feels this vulnerable to alleged corporate manipulation, vulnerable to these kinds of contract negotiation tactics that could potentially cost him tens of millions.
Yeah.
What does that really tell us about the immense power of the corporate machine that governs the music industry? And maybe more chillingly, how quickly digital metrics, things like stream counts, can apparently be weaponized in these high-stakes battles.
That's a sobering thought.
Definitely. But despite all those high stakes, the incredibly detailed claims, the alleged corporate malice, the lawsuit ultimately went nowhere.
That's right. The verdict was crystal clear. Judge Vargas dismissed the case in October 2025. Drake received absolutely no damages. Zero.
Why? What was the judge's reasoning? How could claims this specific just get thrown out?
Well, the judge's rationale really hinged on a very long-standing, fundamental legal principle: the protection of freedom of artistic expression.
Okay.
Judge Vargas ruled that the controversial statements within Kendrick Lamar's track, not like us, even the really harsh ones, they constituted non-actionable opinion.
Opinion, not defamation.
Exactly, rather than being defamatory statements of fact.
Okay, let's break that down a little for listeners who aren't lawyers. What's the critical difference there between opinion and a statement of fact, especially when we're talking about a hip-hop battle? That distinction seems to be everything.
It really is, and it boils down to essentially provability, verification. A defamatory statement of fact is something specific that you could, theoretically, prove true or false in court with evidence. Like, if the song had claimed Drake specifically embezzled $1 million from UMG on Tuesday, you could investigate that, look at records, right?
That's verifiable.
But an opinion?
Yeah.
Well, that's often hyperbole, interpretation, subjective judgment, artistic exaggeration, calling someone names, even harsh ones like criminal or unfit, in the context of an artistic work or a feud. Courts usually see that as opinion.
So the court basically said, look, this is art. It's part of a known competitive environment, a rap battle.
Pretty much. And because these statements weren't presented as objective, verifiable facts that someone would reasonably take as literal truth, they're protected speech. Courts are just famously reluctant to step in and referee artistic disputes. They don't want to police song lyrics, especially in a genre like hip-hop where diss tracks and hyperbole are, part of the furniture.
And that reluctance played right into UMG's defense, didn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Their motion to dismiss basically said, look, Drake lost a rap battle he provoked and in which he willingly participated. Their argument was, the traditional response to a diss track is another diss track, not a lawsuit. This is how the genre works.
Which brings us right to that culture clash you mentioned earlier.
Huge clash, because while UMG's argument might hold up legally, culturally, it caused a massive backlash against Drake himself.
Yeah, I remember seeing that online.
A lot of fans, industry observers too, really criticized him. They saw it as, well, the word used was snitching, or just acting counter to hip-hop's unwritten rules about handling beef within the culture musically.
So taking it out of the studio and into the courtroom arguably damaged his, street cred more than the diss track itself did, at least for some people.
For a significant portion of the audience, yeah, I think that's fair to say. The legal move was seen as violating the code.
But, to be fair, we have to acknowledge Drake's counter-argument here. His legal team wasn't just saying he hurt my feelings. Their point was more nuanced, right?
It was. They argued that Not Like Us crossed a really critical line. It wasn't just artistic trash talk anymore.
Because of this specific allegation?
Yes. By including those specific claims that implied criminal conduct, they argued it could potentially incite real-world violence or cause tangible harm to his safety and reputation, going way beyond just artistic expression. That, they argued, made it legally actionable.
So it stopped being just art, in their view, and became a potential real-world threat demanding a legal, not just musical, response.
That was the tightrope they tried to walk legally. Where does protected artistic expression end and actionable defamation or endangerment begin? In this specific instance, Judge Vargas came down heavily on the side of artistic protection, reinforcing that, generally speaking, competitive speech in this context, even if it's vicious, is treated as opinion.
Okay, so the lawsuit failed. Legally, the precedent seems to reinforce protection for artistic opinion, even harsh opinion, in feuds. But let's talk about the fallout. What are the longer-term industry-wide implications here? What's the so what now, even though Drake lost the case itself?
Oh, the so what is actually immense, even with the dismissal, especially regarding the whole issue of streaming platform integrity.
How so?
Well, the sheer level of detail in those allegations about bot farms, about platform manipulation, whether they were ultimately proven in court or not, they left a mark. They put these ideas out there in a very public, very high-profile way.
Right. The accusations themselves caused a stir.
A huge stir. It forced Spotify, for example, to come out publicly in December 2024 and explicitly deny the claims. They said they investigated and found zero evidence of bot attacks related to this.
But the cat's kind of out of the bag now, isn't it?
Exactly. The public exposure of these alleged practices, sophisticated bot farms, digital payola, maybe even weaponized search algorithms, it's definitely ramped up pressure within the industry. There are much louder calls now for greater transparency from the streaming platforms.
And maybe regulators are paying attention too.
Very possibly. You have federal regulators increasingly looking into market fairness and competition in the digital economy anyway. Allegations like these, especially involving players as big as UMG and platforms like Spotify and Apple, they certainly don't go unnoticed.
Interesting. So even if UMG wasn't punished for defamation, the case put a spotlight on potential market manipulation, which could attract a different kind of scrutiny.
Absolutely. It's a different angle, but potentially just as serious. And furthermore, the lawsuit really did illuminate that ethical tightrope that major labels have to walk.
With competing artists on the same roster.
Yeah. When you've got superstars like Drake and Kendrick under the same corporate umbrella, duking it out publicly, the label is in a really tricky position. There are inherent conflicts of interest around how you allocate promotional support, resources, how do you stay neutral, how do you act fairly.
Especially, as Drake alleged, when a big contract negotiation is on the horizon.
Precisely. This case really highlighted the lack of clear, established guidelines for how major labels should handle these internal feuds fairly. It puts their potential biases under a harsh light.
So maybe more pressure for internal reform there, too.
Could be. And finally, while this ruling might discourage artists from suing over diss tracks based on defamation, the other part of the allegations, the really detailed claims about how streaming manipulation allegedly works.
The bots, the platform deal.
Yeah, that specific information being aired so publicly might actually accelerate industry self-regulation. It could push platforms to adopt new technical standards, better auditing, anything to ensure more authentic stream counts and make the system less vulnerable to being gamed or weaponized like this.
Okay, so pulling it all together, this was never really just about two rappers feuding, was it?
Not at all when you look deeper. It ended up exposing some potentially deep vulnerabilities in the whole streaming economy. It peeled back the curtain on the often opaque world of modern promotional tactics.
And it starkly revealed the intense financial incentives that can drive corporate behavior, potentially even against their own top talent, especially when a billion-dollar contract negotiation is looming.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
No.
The Drake v. UMG lawsuit, yeah, it failed in court. But you could argue it kind of succeeded culturally, or at least structurally,
How so?
by ripping that curtain back, exposing the potential dark side of streaming metrics, the inherent label conflicts, and that fundamental tension between, traditional artistic expression and modern defamation law in a high-stakes digital age. It showed just how incredibly high the stakes have become.
Which leads perfectly into a final thought for our listeners.
Right. So here's something to really chew on. Judge Vargas's dismissal, it definitely reinforced the legal protections for artistic opinion, right? We established that. But think about the intense economic pressures this case revealed. Specifically, those allegations about using bots and platform manipulation to gain leverage in a massive contract negotiation. It raises this really important question. Have the economics of the streaming era fundamentally changed the nature of these public feuds? Have the financial stakes gotten so astronomically high that artists are now forced into this impossible choice?
It's choice between what?
Between sticking to cultural norms, responding musically, keeping it in the culture, and prioritizing their enormous financial interest and maybe even personal safety by resorting to legal action. Has the money changed the game completely?
That really is the ultimate question, isn't it? The stakes clearly are higher, maybe impossibly higher than they've ever been before.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for joining us for this deep dive into contract power, that culture clash, and the sometimes murky underbelly of streaming metrics. Definitely keep exploring these topics: streaming transparency, contract negotiation, power dynamics.
Yeah, they're not going away.
They're absolutely shaping the future of the music business as we speak.